Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today.
Hello, and welcome to the Money and You show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and we are here at ubngo.com, broadcasting from the studio, and actually from my house. What am I saying? That's the first time I've said that, and I'm not in the studio. I'm at home. So there you go. My brain is not on. I wanted to talk about something interesting today. I wanted to talk about the fact that I was having a conversation with my husband, and it was getting kind of heated around money. And I realized, I've got a better grip on my relationship with money right now than I do with my relationship with my husband. So I thought this is kind of interesting. Marriage and money, I know it's a thing. I know a lot of people have issues around it. And I started to kind of reflect back on when you've been married a really long time, it starts to be something where the old rules don't apply anymore. So much about life has changed. And yet maybe you haven't kept that money conversation going in a way where it's evolved as well. And it's like making sense for wherever your life is now. So I just decided right there and then, we need to talk about marriage and money. And I started researching, and I find a whole new discipline called financial therapy coming up. And, it's interesting to start looking at some things, including statistics. I saw something in Forbes where it said that money issues are responsible for 22% of all divorces, making it the third leading cause, according to the Institute for Divorce Financial Analysis, or analysts. And money issues are super troublesome, and people say they're experiencing stress in their relationship, and finances are one of the top reasons for that. This part I thought was funny. Easily beating out second place contender, annoying habits. So I thought that was hysterical because annoying habits are annoying. I know that. And that was according to a study by SunTrust. So this might seem grim for married couples, but it's not, because like any problem, if you're aware of it and you can take control of it and make it, improve it. So this is no different. Talking about money in your marriage isn't any different than talking about anything, anywhere. It just takes being honest and brave, really, to have the conversation, because it's not always fun. And sometimes unfun conversations get avoided. And I think that's what happens a lot in marriage with money, is you have a bad conversation, you think, I don't want to even go there. It's detrimental to our marriage, but really it's detrimental to your financial situation. It's detrimental to your plans and your goals for wealth building and for freedom in your life and just for the lifestyle that you want. So it's actually good for your marriage to have the conversation, even if it's hard, but it's really good for your money. And of course, when you're in better financial health, everything's better. The stress is less, and that in itself makes your whole marriage better. And so money stress, why do people fight about money? Because one of you, at least, if not both, are getting triggered in some way and feeling stress around something. Might be that you're stressed about something somebody wants to spend money on, might be stressed about, debt, might be stressed about how much somebody is earning. But there's a level of stress there that is really contributing to some of the problems and the difficulties. And, stress is an energetic thing. It has a way of sort of being contagious, and you're stressed. And so then the other person feels stressed. And all of a sudden you've got this like really volatile situation with people who are on kind of a high emotional level, and then conversations are even harder. So there's a lot of snowball effect here that happens. So let's just talk about what you can do, because obviously, if you are aware that this is a possibility, then it's actually quite easy to make a difference in this scenario. talking about money can feel pretty unromantic. So when you're first starting out in a relationship, maybe even before you're married, you really need to talk about it. And you'll have to kind of get over that, idea that this is a topic that's going to just like squash the fun in your relationship, because you can make it fun. And talking about money, if you start out this way, if you start by making it something where you create an environment where you can have kind of a fun money conversation, you keep it light, you don't get into, topics that are too heavy right away, and you build a foundation for having these conversations, then you can build on that for the rest of your life. So I think it's really important to have the conversations early, because surprises aren't fun. Negative surprises aren't fun. And that's what can happen if you don't have these conversations early on. So, flip that whole story that talking about money has to be a giant drag and, is just going to create conflict and be stressful. It doesn't have to be that way. So make it an okay, or better yet, a fun conversation. And just know that there are ways to do that. You think about other conversations that you might have that are also difficult, and ask yourself, how can I make a conversation like that fun? Just apply that to your money conversation as well. Be calm, be understanding, do some breathing exercises before you sit down. Think about it ahead of time. Think about what might trigger you in the conversation and kind of prepare yourself. Like, what am I going to do if my partner says this? And just get yourself in a frame of mind where you're ready for that. It might happen, and you know how you're going to react, because everything's in the reaction. So it's really like there are four of you when you sit down to have a money conversation, because there's you and there's your partner, or whoever the relationship is. It doesn't always have to be a partner. Sometimes hard money conversations happen in different ways with your parents, with somebody else. But for now, let's keep it to kind of this marriage scenario. And but there's really four of you in that conversation. There's you, there's your partner, and then there are the two money personalities that live in your brains, two different ones coming from different places with different beliefs, different ways of having, grown up with different ideas. And so the four of you are now sitting around talking about this. So it's not so much you and this person that you think you know. It's you and the person you think you know. And then all these old unconscious beliefs that are going to come out in the conversation. They just will. And so really important to know that, and really important to understand who you're married to in that way. So how did they grow up? How did they, how was money talked about, or was money never talked about? Was there fighting around money? What happened in their early life with money? What happened in your early life with money? You have to acknowledge that too. You have to understand it. And you have to take that into consideration and realize the two of you are coming at this with different belief systems. And so just knowing that can help, because initially when somebody says something you don't agree with, you just start thinking, oh my gosh, this person, either they don't know what they're talking about, or, your mind will start kind of thinking negatively about them. But really you can step back and think, why are they thinking this? Why, was it because their parents taught them this, or what was it? So Tony, actually, who's running the show and owns a UBN studio, just put in the chat, I can relate with my husband and myself, different cultures. So bringing in a different culture is a whole extra can of worms. Tony.
Well, actually, I do have a question for you, Michelle. Hopefully you can answer. And I think it might help some people out there that might be going through this, or if they marry into a different culture. I married into somebody that's from Brazil. So it's more of a traditional Latino family, where families are more of a huge group of people, living together, supporting each other financially. Where I came from, you might, if your parents ever needed help, but my parents never needed help, we would help them, but we're not necessarily like helping siblings, taking care of them, putting them through school. And so this has been kind of a head butter for Will and I, where, without me knowing it, sending them monthly money, and putting somebody through school. And, and for me, I'm like, wait a minute, we're trying to save for our own future and our own home. And we can't be, putting that money into somebody else's pocket. And so it has made us butt heads.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a really, really great example. I mean, yeah, a great example. And I could see where that could be extremely problematic. And I don't know if the two of you talked about it early on, that this was kind of something that was part of, his plan, or if it came as a surprise. But I guess this, speaks to what I was just saying, which is you need to talk about all of these things early on so that at least there's a conversation going. Now, sometimes people don't change their minds about what they want to do, but at least you can come to kind of a compromise or a consensus if you, consensus this is just too important, for somebody. Now, understanding each other is really the key here.
Mm-hmm.
Won't be necessarily that you'll completely agree with one another, but understanding where the other person is coming from is super important. And what you're saying is, yeah, I mean, you grew up in two different cultures with different ideas about how you, spend money, but more importantly, how you share your money with your family members. And that's a really big one.
Mm-hmm. It was a shock for me. And I did find out, because and you can maybe touch on this, married people. So he has his own accounts, mm-hmm. which I don't have access to. Mm-hmm. Then we have my accounts, which he has access to. So okay. He sees what I spend, but I don't see what he spends. And so I didn't know he was sending money to them. And mm-hmm. so for me, it was like, at least you could have talked to me about it.
Yeah.
Because my thing is, if somebody's starving, yes, I understand that. But if I'm just putting it so they can buy extra things, no, because I would like to take care of my family here. Me and him first.
Right. Yeah, I understand. And yeah, super interesting. And you bring up a lot of things, actually. I mean, the number one way to make this work is to communicate.
Yeah, we have been a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And this idea of, who has shared bank accounts and private bank accounts and all of that, that's something that I think every couple needs to figure out on their own. But I do think there are some kind of overall ground rules, like, well, I don't even know if I don't really believe in ground rules as much as I'm sounding like I do. But what I do think is our feelings and our emotions come up a lot with money. That's the thing that, mm-hmm. You can learn, you can be super financially literate and all of that and know all the things to do, but it's the emotional piece that actually drives our behavior. So, we need to be able to understand our emotions around this, mm-hmm. and we need to be able to really look at them kind of critically, and then we need to be able to talk about them and express how we feel about this. So clearly, this is a great example of kind of an emotional situation. I mean, it's going to dredge up a lot of feelings around this. And I think it's super important to just set some boundaries on it, come up with a compromise. I mean, maybe if he's, absolutely has to do this because this is just what he had always planned to do as a part of his family.
Right.
Maybe there are just financial limitations, or maybe there's more, maybe you agree on a number that is maybe not perfect, but you can agree on. And then maybe there's just more transparency, because that's the other thing. And this happens a lot. I was going to get to this. So I'm not going to go in order anymore of what I
sorry to throw you off.
But no, this is good. I think it's so the transparency issue is real. And this was part of what I was thinking when I decided to do this, is the longer your marriage goes, the easier it is to kind of not bother to tell people things, and or to have kind of some other things going on that you don't share with your partner, whether that's investments they don't know about, or bank accounts they don't know about, or debt that they don't know about. There's a lot. You stop. Sometimes, not everybody, but sometimes, your marriage goes on a long time, and suddenly there are a lot of things that maybe, you don't feel like you have to share. You're not maybe sharing in the same way that maybe you once did. Obviously, marriages are all different, and some would never go there, and some would. So, but I just think it takes more effort as you go along to have these conversations, to make it a priority, and to keep everything, to keep the conversations going. So I think you need to have regular financial meetings for sure, and to be honest and upfront about what you're doing. I mean, if you want your own I like my own bank account. I don't really want somebody seeing everything I'm spending money on.
I'm starting to realize that now.
Yeah, well, I like a joint account.
Yes, so for sure.
Household expenses come out of that. Yes. People put their earnings in, and then you pay for the house, or you pay for the rent, or you pay for whatever out of that. But then I do think it's good to have your own accounts. I think it's the other thing that can happen in a marriage is somebody takes more responsibility with money, and then the other person sort of over time takes less and less until there's like one person in control of everything.
Right.
There's one person who's really doing it all. And a lot of times the person who's not doing it is perfectly happy. It's like, I hate dealing with money. I don't want to. As soon as you start thinking things like that, I feel like you're kind of in trouble. Like, you need to step back in and be part of it. Even if you don't, maybe you don't have to take control. You don't have to maybe even do some of the things that the other, but you have to be aware. You can't be, it's just, oh my gosh, I've heard so many stories about people who, they're sitting there, they get on the computer one day and they check their bank account, and, yesterday there was $2 million in there, and today there's like $5 in there. And so, you really don't want to, it seems inconceivable at the beginning of a marriage that this could happen, but these things do happen. And so, there are people who don't know where their bank accounts are. One person is taking care of them, and if push came to shove and that person fell off a cliff, then the other person wouldn't even know where their money was, wouldn't know how many accounts there were, wouldn't know how to get into them. So that's a problem. That's not a situation that you want, and you shouldn't let yourself get into that situation, and really the other person shouldn't allow you to be in that situation, but it happens. So, I do think people should have their own accounts so they don't feel like somebody's always seeing everything that they're doing. I think that's a little restrictive, but at the same time, each person should have an understanding of what funds are going into that account. Can be anything you decide. But what goes into your personal account that you have total access to, spend how you want, and what goes into the joint account, and what goes into a savings account, and what, so I think those kinds of decisions really help. And then you've got freedom within a structure, if that makes sense.
For sure.
Yeah. And so, but again, those feelings, you can't walk around throughout your marriage with certain feelings that, where you basically have unresolved issues. So if it really bothers you that somebody isn't, has an account that you don't see, you can pretend it doesn't matter to you for a while. But if it does matter to you, and if it does bother you, and those feelings come up when you think about it, or when you're talking to them and you're starting to get maybe distrustful or whatever, then that has to be addressed earlier rather than later, because those things have a way of getting more difficult as you let them go. So
no, it does. I could see where it could build resentment up, if because what happened was, the money that was sent to the mother, well, his sister-in-law ended up stealing it all and wiped it out, and so all that money that was sent, which was a couple $1,000s, but for Brazil that's a lot of money. yeah, it was, not secure. That's why I was like, I don't want to take other care of other people. But it is true. I mean, it's one of those, it can be resentful if somebody agrees on something and then they do it anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And, I mean, you have already an understanding that this is a cultural difference.
Oh, for sure. I've learned
it's
that.
not him being just like whatever with money. It's actually something that he grew up as part of his belief system, that this is what you do. So, understanding is the first step. And then coming to terms with the differences is the second step. And so, once you each understand each other, and just to acknowledge that, there are going to be differences. There are going to be things that, you think are right and he thinks are right. And then you have to come to kind of a meeting of the minds, and probably there's some compromise on both sides. And then to know the limitations. So, maybe if there's a dollar amount, if there's a particular person, I mean, whatever the limitation is for you and him, then that at least brings back a little sense of control. So it's not just unknown amounts going out, whatever.
That makes sense. Awesome.
Yeah. So boundaries are a big deal. Communication is the biggest deal. You have to be able to, and money conversations can go south fast. And so, and a lot of times that is because people come into it like almost already, ready for a fight, especially if prior experiences have been kind of feisty. And so coming into it calm, being understanding of the other person and the fact that they have different ways of operating in the money world, different ways of thinking about it, knowing that just a money conversation is hard, and knowing that the two of you aren't going to see this exactly the same way. So what do you do with that? Do you, start calling each other names and telling the other one how, crazy and stupid they are? I mean, that's kind of where it goes a lot of times, unfortunately. So trying not to attack the other person. Once it gets to the point where you feel like attacking the other person, it's definitely time for a timeout. And I really feel like sometimes money conversations with your partner can feel like you've just you've just lost 40 years and all of a sudden, you're 15 again. And so sometimes you just plain old need a timeout from those conversations. And so just to actually know when to stop so you can come back to it, after you calm down a little bit with a new resolve, because there's no getting away from it. You can try to just run away and avoid it, but you really have to keep having them until they're more constructive, until you get to the point where you've figured out some method where it can be constructive and both of you can participate. Because sometimes what happens too is one person kind of takes over and is sort of railroading the other person. Again, that creates a lot of feelings that, they're sort of simmering, and there's anger in there, and there's resentment or upset. And if it doesn't get resolved, the next time you talk, you're going to have an issue with that. So this is all sounding very negative. This is all sounding like I didn't mean it to. I actually want these money conversations to be fun, but I'm not ignorant of kind of the way they can go. And so it takes an effort to make it enjoyable, to make it loving and calm and understanding and considerate and honest and all the things. It's a really hard, it's a hard conversation to have, but a super, super important one. I think it will bind people together in a way, in as strong a way as it can drive people apart. So I think it's that important to have those conversations if you want to continue to have a good life with that person. And listening is everything. So when you have these conversations, sometimes, I like to set the timer and just listen to the other person's explanation for what's going on. Maybe they have something they want to share, instead of, interrupting and putting your 2 cents in or getting defensive or arguing a point. Just listen. And you can't stop, you can't not listen until the timer goes off. That's a really good method to do it. And then the other person gets to talk and just be listened to. But there's something that happens in the money conversation where we stop listening and we stop hearing the other person, and we're really just, nobody's getting anything out of that. So just, trying to be the winner of the fight, basically. So Let's see what else. So one of the things that I think is really important, and Tony, maybe this helps, is the other thing that I find we do maybe earlier in our marriages are we're big on setting goals. Let's plan that Hawaii trip. Let's plan that house we're going to buy. Let's save for kids' college, whatever it is. We have goals and we have plans, and we said, we kind of set spending plans or budgets, and we try to do what we need to do to reach those goals. And we have financial goals. Then time goes on and we either stick with the same plan, even though our life and income and everything else is different, or we just kind of get lazy and don't really, don't participate in the planning and those discussions as much as we used to. And those conversations are fun because we're looking to all the possibilities in the future and how to make them happen. So those can be very fun conversations. And so keep those going. I mean, those should be regular. Maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's, half yearly, whatever it is, but really goal conversations, because when you have those, then maybe that helps with some of the things like what you're talking about, Tony, where, money is going to other places. Well, how is that going to impact the goals that you two have together? Right. And so that might be a way to look at that and say, well, if we restrict that a little bit, maybe we'll be closer to meeting our goals. And some of this, I already touched on, assigning kind of duties for money. There's a lot of stuff we have to do with money. We have to keep our insurances up. We have to check on them to see if they're still appropriate. We have to pay bills. We have to, do this and that. Obviously, there's a huge list of them. Who's doing that? And do you like your jobs? Maybe, take the time to shift those around too, so that makes it a little more fun, maybe, because sometimes somebody is really good at getting the bills paid. And so then they do it for the next 40 years. Well, I don't know, maybe it's important that the other person see what bills are coming in, because that's another problem. When you're the only one taking care of everything, you're the one looking at the bank accounts, you're the one paying bills, you're really in the know and the other isn't. That's another reason that you can get into arguments, because one person doesn't know that much and you know everything. And so when you talk about things, it's hard to have a conversation that's kind of on an even playing field. And so somebody might, want you to be doing something, only you're the only one who knows the numbers. You're the only one who understands your financial situation. And so it's easy to for that to devolve as well. So you should both be in the know. You should both be tracking things, and maybe different things. But then if you're tracking different things, then talk about it. And don't keep anyone in the dark as far as what you're doing. So kind of obvious, but people do it all the time. Very easy to do with money, actually. And, sometimes it doesn't hurt anything, but in the long run, it ends up usually kind of being something that comes back and bites you. Regular money meetings, super important. This is something that I never understand either, is that financial planners, so you go to your financial planner, you plan for retirement, for example. It's almost as if life is going to go exactly as you plan. Like you set this goal, you figure out how much you need to retire after a certain number of years, make all these assumptions. And I don't know how any of that takes into account losing a job, or, falling off your horse or your motorcycle and not being able to work for a while, or getting sick, or your house burning down, like we saw a lot here in Malibu. And there are just so many things, obviously. I mean, I'm not telling anybody anything new, but so many things that happen in your life that will interrupt or shift that plan. And so I think it's just crucial, not only that you plan with your financial planner, but that you sit down together and you look. Sometimes people are just miserable in their jobs and they need to stop, and they need to take a little bit of a break, and then they need to start up again, which can be costly, but also incredibly important for people's mental health and for the health of their relationship. All of these things are going to change the game as you go along. And I think that's one of the interesting things. We sometimes get locked into a point in time, and our marriage is going along into the future, and we have to make sure that our money conversations are going along with the realities of the situation. So this is just a short list of the things that I think you want to think about when you're thinking about getting married, or if you are married. It doesn't really matter where you are. If you're, I mean, it's great to start this at the very beginning, but if you're not at the beginning, it's never too late. It's always a good time. It's always a good time to start managing your money. It's always a good time to start talking about money. And if you feel yourself you or your partner getting a little lazy in this department, like, I remember back in the day when we used to like have money plans and have goals and do budgets and really have, kind of exciting conversations around where we wanted to go and how we were going to get there. And if you're not doing that now, you need to start that back up, because it actually is kind of a killer, both financially and in terms of your marriage. So I think that's the main point, is stay in the game. Don't drop out and just get complacent with the whole thing, because the world's changing too. Oh my gosh, the world has changed so much. I mean, when I got married, I don't think there were like computers out there. I guess there were computers, but nobody had a laptop, let's put it that way. And nobody had a cell phone. So, everything has changed. And the last thing, is to be tuned in, have your antenna up. How is your partner feeling about money right now? And if they're not talking about it, get them to talk about it, because maybe they are kind of, as things go along too, and life moves forward, sometimes people don't feel like they've achieved the things they've wanted to achieve. And sometimes they feel like they haven't made as much money as they'd hoped to make. I hear a lot about this, they're kind of disappointed. It didn't all work out the way they hoped. And so that's a great time to stop and help your partner out with some discussions about this and getting them kind of, re-energized around both their life and the topic of money. And so I think that is super important, because it is one of those things where you may never talk about it. You may talk about it a lot at the beginning, and you need to keep talking about it throughout your marriage, and in a way that keeps things positive and upbeat and connected and, moving you forward to a good place. So I think that's all I have to say for today about money and marriage. There's a lot more to say. There's a lot. This is a really important thing. If you're a married person and you're not talking about money, and you're not thinking about how to talk about money and what to talk about, I really think you're missing a huge part of what is going to make, the two of you successful as a couple, and also just financially successful in reaching the goals you want. So with that, I will close and wish you good luck in your money conversations. You can join us Mondays at ubngo.com at 7 p.m. and see us on all the, you can see us on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel, and you can hear us on all the podcast platforms. Thank you so much for being here, and I'd love to hear from you. If you want to send questions or comments, Michelle at limitfreelife.com is my email, and you can always go to limitfreelife.com for free resources around money, career, and business, and access some of those and see if they'll help you out. And we love having you listening to the show. So please subscribe. And if you like, leave a review, and have a great week.